Part 1. For over 100 years, Earth had been part of something much bigger than itself. The Galactic Council was a union of more than 200 intelligent species, all working together under a set of rules meant to keep peace, share knowledge, and avoid war. Earth had joined quietly without fanfare, after first contact was made near the rings of Saturn. At the time, humanity was still healing from its own wars and eager for a place among the stars. The Council welcomed them, not as equals, but as learners. Earth accepted this. For a while it worked, but over time things changed. Humans began to innovate in ways the older species had not expected. They built faster ships using gravity assist drives no one else had thought of. They created medical nanites that could heal wounds in minutes. Their art, music, and stories began to spread through the lower tiers of the Council's data networks, touching species that had never known human emotion. Slowly, Earth stopped being just a student. It became a voice, sometimes awkward, often passionate, but always present. Daniel Hayes had been Earth's lead envoy to the Council for nearly 8 years. He was a quiet man from Oregon, with tired eyes and a habit of tapping his pen when deep in thought. He believed in diplomacy, in patience, in finding common ground. But even he was running out of reasons to defend the Council's decisions. The latest demand had come without warning. A formal edict, delivered by a silver-robed Xanthari delegate, stated that Earth must shut down its quantum resonance network within 30 solar days. The reason given was vague. Potential risk to galactic information stability. The network wasn't a weapon. It was a communication system. Built over 2 decades by scientists in Nairobi, Oslo, and Buenos Aires, it allowed messages to be sent instantly across any distance. No lag, no delay, no need for relay stations. For the first time in history, a child on Mars could speak to her grandmother in Mumbai in real time. Colonies on the edge of known space could call for help and be heard immediately. To Earth, it was a miracle of connection. To the Council, it was a threat. President Elena Ruiz called an emergency session of the Unified Senate. She was a former teacher from New Mexico, elected not for her charisma but for her clarity. She listened as generals warned of retaliation. Economists predicted trade collapse and scientists pleaded for more time. But when Daniel Hayes stood to speak, the room fell silent. "They don't fear our weapons," he said, voice low but steady. "They fear our ideas. Our network doesn't just send data, it sends understanding. And understanding changes people. It changes systems. The Council isn't worried about chaos. They're worried about losing control." The vote happened at dawn. Every representative from the icy outposts of Europa to the floating cities of Venus cast their ballot. The result was unanimous. Earth would not dismantle the network. And if the Council would not accept that, then Earth would no longer be part of the Council. The announcement went out 3 hours later. Not through official channels, but through every human-owned broadcast station, every satellite, every ship in orbit. The message was short. Effective immediately. Earth withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and obligations under the Galactic Council. We severed diplomatic, economic, and military ties. We do this not in anger, but in principle. Humanity chooses its own path. Across the galaxy, the reaction was shock. No species had ever left the Council. Not once in its 5,000-year history. Some members thought it was a bluff. Others assumed Earth would return within weeks, humbled and ready to obey. But Earth did not return. Instead, it went quiet. Within 24 hours, all human embassies in alien cities were closed. Staff packed what they could and boarded the last shuttles home. On the orbital hub of Xylos Prime, a young human engineer named Kyle Dawson stood alone on the observation deck as his transport prepared to leave. He watched alien ships dart through the sky, their lights blinking in patterns he no longer understood. He felt no fear, only a strange sense of relief. For the first time in his life, he was going home to a planet that answered to no one but itself. Back on Earth, cities held their breath. People gathered in squares, in homes, in underground shelters, waiting for the Council's response. Would there be sanctions? Would there be war? But days passed, then weeks, and nothing came. No fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. No ultimatums were issued. The silence was louder than any threat. In Geneva, President Ruiz addressed the world from a simple podium in the old UN building. She wore no uniform, no medals, just a plain blue jacket and a small pin shaped like a dove. "We are not enemies of the galaxy," she said. "We are simply no longer willing to be its children. From this day forward, Earth speaks for Earth. Our choices are ours alone, and if that brings hardship, so be it. Freedom is never free. In labs across the planet, work continued. Maya Ellis, a propulsion specialist in Houston, ran final tests on a new warp coil that didn't rely on council-approved materials. In a basement in Jakarta, a group of students built a receiver that could pull signals from deep space without using council encryption. On the moon, miners redirected shipments of helium-3 to Earth's own energy grids instead of export depots. The galaxy watched, confused and uneasy. Earth had not attacked. It had not raged. It had simply stepped away, and in doing so had pulled a thread that many feared might unravel the whole tapestry of interstellar order. The Council scrambled to issue statements to reassure its members, to downplay the significance, but whispers began to spread through the lower corridors of power. If Earth could leave, why couldn't we? Daniel Hayes stood on a hill outside Portland, looking up at the night sky. The stars were the same as always, but they felt different now. Closer, brighter. He knew the hard days were coming. Trade embargoes, isolation, maybe even blockades. But for the first time in a long time, he felt proud. Not because Earth had won a fight, but because it had finally chosen itself. And in that choice, the universe began to shift. Part 2. After Earth cut all ties with the Galactic Council, the planet did something no one expected. It went silent. Not just quiet, completely silent. Every human ship, station, and colony stopped sending signals into deep space. All communication arrays pointed away from the stars. Even the old emergency beacons on abandoned outposts were switched off. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth simply vanished. This was not a trick of technology. It was a choice. The Unified Senate called it the Silence Protocol. The idea was simple. If Earth could not speak as an equal, it would not speak at all. No pleas, no threats, no negotiations. Just silence. The move confused alien observers. Council envoys sent to the edge of the solar system received no response. Their messages bounced off automated defense drones that hovered near the Oort cloud like ghost sentinels. Each drone carried the same recorded message spoken in calm English. Humanity is no longer part of your order. Inside the solar system, life changed fast. Trade ships that once carried grain from Titan to Viridia, or microchips from Luna to Xanthari space now sat idle in dry docks. Factories that built parts for Council standard engines retooled overnight to make human-designed systems. People were scared at first. Prices rose. Some shelves emptied. But then something unexpected happened. Communities began to work together in ways they hadn't in decades. Farmers in Iowa shared seeds with labs in Chile to grow food that didn't need alien fertilizers. Engineers in Cairo and Manila built new power grids using only Earth-made parts. The silence from space made people listen to each other more. On Mars, in the red dust of the Valles Marineris colony, Kyle Dawson stood in a hangar filled with half-finished freighters. He had returned from Xylos Prime weeks earlier, his hands still smelling of alien metal. Now he worked 16-hour days with a team of pilots, mechanics, and programmers. Their mission was clear: retrofit every civilian ship with independent warp drives. No more relying on Council jump gates that could be shut off with a single command. The new drives used a mix of human physics and salvaged alien tech, reverse-engineered from a crashed scout vessel found buried under Martian ice 10 years before. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Near Saturn's moon Titan, Maya Ellis tested a prototype drive in secret. She floated inside a pressurized pod, watching numbers scroll across her screen. The drive hummed softly, bending space in a way that made her stomach drop. It worked. Not as smooth as the Council's version, but it worked without their permission, their codes, or their oversight. She smiled for the first time in months. "We're free," she whispered, though no one was there to hear. Back on Earth, rumors spread faster than news ever had. Some said the Council was planning an invasion. Others claimed Earth was building a secret weapon in the asteroid belt. But the truth was quieter and more powerful. In hidden shipyards beyond Neptune, the Terran Defense Initiative, formed not by generals but by civilian scientists and retired pilots, began assembling a new kind of fleet. These ships had no names like the old warships of human history. They were called Aegis class after an ancient word for protection. Sleek, fast, and powered by zero-point energy cores dug from ruins under the Pacific Ocean, they were built not to attack but to guard. Captain Lisa Tran oversaw the project from a command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had once flown supply runs for the Council's peacekeeping force. Now she trained crews who had never seen battle but knew every bolt on their ships. "We're not here to fight," she told them during drills. "We're here to make sure no one forces us to." Meanwhile, the galaxy struggled to understand what Earth was doing. Without human bioengineered microbes, 3 terraforming projects on distant worlds stalled. Crops failed, atmospheres thinned. On the planet Krellis, a farming colony dependent on Earth-made soil enhancers faced famine. The Council sent aid, but it was slow and inefficient. People began to ask why Earth had been so easily dismissed. In fringe systems, traders whispered about strange signals coming from the Sol system. Not messages, but bursts of raw data. No one could decode them. Some thought it was noise. Others believed it was a test. A few, like the young Qatari scholar Lyra, suspected it was something else entirely. She spent nights in her university library on Viridia, comparing the signal patterns to old human broadcasts. She found rhythms that matched human music, poetry, even children's lullabies. "They're not hiding," she wrote in her journal. "They're waiting." The Council grew nervous. They sent spies disguised as merchants, scientists, even refugees to human colonies. But they found nothing useful. No weapons factories, no war plans. Just people building, fixing, teaching, and living. The more they watched, the less they understood. Earth wasn't acting like a rebellious child. It was acting like a grown adult who had finally walked out of a bad relationship. In Geneva, President Elena Ruiz met with her advisors in a room lit only by candlelight. Power rationing had begun, not because of shortages, but to remind people that every resource mattered now. "They think silence means weakness," she said. "Let them keep thinking that. While they watch, we prepare. While they talk, we build." And build they did. In orbit above Earth, construction drones assembled the first ring of the Helios Array, a network of stations designed not for war, but for memory. Each station held petabytes of human knowledge. Every book ever written, every song ever recorded, every medical breakthrough, every lesson learned from war and peace. Scientist Noah Bennett, a soft-spoken man from Ohio, oversaw the project. He didn't see it as a weapon. He saw it as a promise. "If we disappear," he told his team, "let the universe know we were here, and let them know we tried to be good." Months passed. The silence held. The Council held emergency meetings, but no action was taken. They feared that any move against Earth might inspire others to follow. Already, murmurs of dissent rose from younger species tired of the Council's rigid rules. Earth's quiet defiance was becoming a symbol. One evening, on a small island in the Pacific, a boy named Jake Morales pointed a homemade radio toward the stars. He wasn't looking for alien voices. He was listening for Earth's own signal, the one they had stopped sending. He heard static, then faintly a tone, then silence again. He smiled. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Earth was still there, and it was still human. The galaxy waited. Earth worked. And in that quiet space between fear and hope, something new began to grow. Or 6 months after Earth went silent, the galaxy began to feel the weight of its absence. At first, the changes were small, barely noticed by most. A shipment of neural translators failed to arrive at a trade hub near the Andromeda border. A medical supply depot on the moon of Gallus ran out of antiviral nanites and had to rely on older, slower treatments. But soon the gaps grew wider. Without Earth's bioengineered microbes, 3 Council-backed terraforming projects on barren worlds stalled completely. The soil would not hold nutrients. The air would not stabilize. Colonists who had been promised green fields and blue skies now stared at rust-colored dust and thin, unbreathable air. The Council tried to fix things. They assigned Xanthari engineers to replicate human soil formulas. They asked the Varelians to design new communication relays, but nothing worked as well. Human tech had always been a little messy, a little intuitive, built not just with logic, but with empathy. It was designed for life, not just function, and that was something the older species had forgotten how to do. On the planet Viridia, a young Qatari scholar named Lyra sat in a dimly lit archive, scrolling through fragments of old human broadcasts. She wasn't supposed to be there. Human data had been flagged as non-essential by the Council, and most libraries had purged it. But Lyra had saved copies. She believed Earth's departure wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a mirror. And what it reflected was uncomfortable. She wrote a paper. Not a formal report, but a quiet essay shared only with friends at first. In it, she argued that the Council had grown lazy, relying on Earth's innovations while pretending they were minor. We called them clever children, she wrote. But they were the ones keeping the house warm while we slept. Her words spread faster than she expected. Students on orbital campuses began quoting her. Workers in cargo docks talked about the Earth problem, not with anger but with shame. A movement started, not loud, not violent, but steady. They called themselves the Free Accord. They didn't want to destroy the Council. They wanted to change it. And they wanted Earth back, not as a subject but as a partner. Back in the Sol system, life moved forward in quiet rhythm. On Mars, Kyle Dawson finished retrofitting the last civilian freighter with an independent warp drive. The ship, nicknamed Steadfast, lifted off from the Red Plains with a cargo of medical supplies bound for Titan. No Council clearance. No inspection. Just human hands, human judgment, and human trust. As it vanished into the sky, Kyle wiped grease from his brow and looked toward Earth, a pale blue dot in the distance. He felt no pride, only purpose. On Titan, Maya Ellis stood in a dome overlooking methane lakes, watching the Steadfast's signal blink on her screen. She had helped design the drive core. It wasn't perfect, the ship would be slower than Council vessels, but it was free. And freedom, she thought, was worth the extra travel time. She turned to her team. Next one's for Europa, she said. They're running low on oxygen recyclers. Meanwhile, in a hidden lab beneath the Andes, Noah Bennett worked late into the night. The Helios array was nearly complete. 12 orbital stations, each loaded with Earth's entire cultural and scientific archive, floated in precise formation around the planet. The system could broadcast data across light years, not as a message to one species but as a gift to all. It included blueprints for clean fusion reactors, open-source medical protocols, recordings of symphonies, folk songs, speeches about justice, and even children's drawings scanned from school notebooks. It was not a weapon. It was a legacy. President Elena Ruiz visited the control center once a week. She never gave orders. She just watched, listened, and sometimes asked simple questions. "Will they understand us?" she asked Noah one evening. He thought for a long time before answering. "Maybe not at first," he said. "But if they try, they will." Outside the solar system, the Free Accord grew. On the trade world of Nuvos, dock workers refused to load ships bound for Council enforcement fleets. On the academic moon of Sirith, professors held lectures on human philosophy, drawing crowds of curious aliens. Even some Council envoys began to question their leaders. "Why did we push them away?" one asked in a closed session. "Because they made us uncomfortable," another replied. "Because they reminded us we stopped growing." Then came the first real test. A small colony on the edge of known space, half human, half Qatari, sent a distress call. Their reactor was failing. They needed parts only Earth made. The Council denied the request, citing non-member status, but the Free Accord acted. A smuggler ship flying no flag slipped past patrol zones and delivered the parts. The colony survived. Word spread. Earth hadn't sent the help, but its tools had saved lives anyway. On Earth, people heard these stories through encrypted channels. They didn't celebrate. They just worked harder. Factories ran double shifts. Schools added engineering classes. Children learned not just math and history, but how to fix a water purifier or program a drone. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was focus. One night, Jake Morales in New Mexico picked up a strange signal on his radio. It wasn't from Earth, it was from Viridia. Faint, broken, but clear enough. A voice, female, young, speaking in careful English. "We see you. We remember." He wrote it down in his notebook and showed it to his teacher the next day. She didn't say much. She just nodded and added it to a growing file labeled Messages from Outside. In Geneva, Daniel Hayes met with President Ruiz. He had aged in the months since the severance. His hair was grayer, his shoulders heavier, but his eyes were sharp. "They're starting to listen," he said. "Not because we shouted, because we stopped talking and let them hear themselves." She smiled. "Good," she said. "Now they'll know the difference between noise and truth." The galaxy was changing, not with explosions or declarations, but with quiet choices. A farmer on Krellis planted seeds saved from an old Earth shipment. A student on Xylos Prime built a translator using human code. A ship captain rerouted her vessel to avoid a council checkpoint. Each act was small, but together they were a tide. Earth did not reach out. It did not beg for attention. It simply existed, building, sharing, remembering. And in doing so, it left the old order not broken, but exposed. The council still sat in its grand halls, issuing orders no one fully obeyed. But the real future was being written elsewhere, in domes on Titan and labs under mountains, in the hearts of those who dared to believe that one planet's choice could echo across the stars. And the echo was just beginning. But the council had tried patience. It had tried silence. Now it chose force. High Conclave members, cloaked in silver and seated in their floating chamber above the gas giant Horus, voted in secret. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Operation Iron Accord was approved. The goal was not destruction, it was demonstration. A fleet of 12 warships led by Admiral Corvex of the Zenthari hegemony would approach the Sol system and demand Earth rejoin the Council under strict supervision. If Earth refused, the fleet would disable its orbital defenses and seize control of the Helios array. The message was clear. No species leaves the Council and walks away untouched. The fleet launched without fanfare. Its ships were massive, armored in dark alloy, their hulls etched with ancient battle glyphs. They moved slowly at first, giving Earth time to see them coming. The Council wanted fear, not surprise. They believed humanity would fold once faced with real power. After all, Earth had no allies, no fleet of its own, no history of war on this scale. But Earth was ready. Hidden in the cold dark beyond Neptune, the Terran Defense Initiative had been watching. Captain Lisa Tran stood on the bridge of the Aegis-class cruiser Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. 12 contacts, all Zenthari design, all heading straight for the inner system. She didn't panic. She gave a single order: activate the array. Across Earth's orbit, the Helios stations hummed to life, not as weapons but as voices. Every station opened its data channels and began broadcasting, not in code, not in warnings, but in open, unencrypted streams. Music poured into space. Jazz from New Orleans, folk songs from Mongolia, symphonies from Vienna. Then came science. Schematics for clean water purifiers, solar grids that worked on any planet, nanite designs that healed without side effects. Then philosophy, speeches about equality, poems about loss, recordings of children laughing. It was all there, freely given, with no strings attached. The Zenthari fleet slowed as the signal washed over them. Their shields were up, their weapons charged, but their crews were confused. This was not resistance. This was generosity. On the bridge of the lead ship, Admiral Corvex stared at his screens. He had expected missiles, not Mozart. He had prepared for defiance, not dignity. Back on Earth, people gathered in parks, on rooftops, in quiet rooms. They knew the fleet was coming. They also knew their ships were outnumbered. But they had made a choice long ago. If they were to fall, they would fall as themselves, not as soldiers, but as humans. President Elena Ruiz stood on the steps of the old UN building, not in a bunker, not in armor, but in the same blue jacket she always wore. She said nothing. She just waited. On Mars, Kyle Dawson watched the fleet's approach on a grainy screen in his workshop. He turned to his team. "If they fire, we respond," he said. "But if they listen, maybe they'll hear something worth keeping." Maya Ellis on Titan rerouted all civilian ships to safe orbits. She didn't arm them. She just made sure they could run if needed. "Let them see we're not hiding," she told her crew. "We're just living." The Zenthari fleet reached the edge of the asteroid belt. Captain Lisa Tran ordered the Vanguard and its sister ships, Sentinel, Horizon, and Dawn, to move into position. They emerged from shadowed orbits, sleek and silent, their hulls glowing faintly with zero-point energy. The Council ships dwarfed them in size, but the human vessels moved with a grace the older designs lacked. No shots were fired. No threats were made. The human fleet simply formed a line between the invaders and Earth. Admiral Corvex opened a channel. His voice was deep, formal, cold. "Earth forces, stand down. You are in violation of Galactic Stability Code 7. Surrender the Helios array and prepare for reintegration." Lisa Tran responded in calm English. "We are not your subjects, Admiral. We are not your problem. Turn back, or listen. For a long moment, there was silence. Then something unexpected happened. A junior officer on one of the Zinthari support ships, a young engineer named Tarek, began downloading the Helios broadcast. He didn't ask permission. He just did it. Others followed. Within minutes, half the fleet was receiving Earth's data stream. Some wept, others argued. A few demanded to know why this knowledge had been kept from them for so long. Admiral Korvek saw the unrest on his own bridge. His first officer, usually loyal, turned to him and said, "Sir, this isn't war. This is a gift." The admiral looked at the pale blue planet ahead, then at the flood of human knowledge pouring into his ship. He thought of his own world, where only the elite had access to advanced medicine, where art was controlled by the state, where children were taught obedience, not questions. He made a decision. "Recall all weapons," he ordered. "Shut down targeting systems." His officers obeyed without question. Then he turned his ship around. One by one, the others followed. The fleet that came to conquer left in silence, carrying not prisoners or trophies, but songs, cures, and ideas. Back on Earth, no one cheered. They just exhaled. Daniel Hayes stood on a hill in Oregon, watching the stars. He knew this wasn't the end. The Council would be furious. There would be consequences. But something had shifted. The galaxy had seen Earth not as a threat, but as a source of light. In the days that followed, the Helios broadcast spread further. Ships from neutral systems began tuning in. Colonies on the fringe downloaded medical files and fixed diseases that had plagued them for generations. A mining outpost on the edge of the Veil Nebula used Earth's solar schematics to power their entire settlement. The Free Accord grew stronger, now with proof that Earth's way worked. President Ruiz gave a short address that night. "We did not fight them," she said. "We reminded them what they had forgotten, that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. That strength is not in control, but in trust." On New Mexico soil, Jake Morales picked up a new signal. It was from a ship near Proxima Centauri. The voice was rough but kind. "Thank you," it said in broken English. "We built a school today, used your plans. Earth had not fired a single shot. It had not begged or bargained. It had simply opened its hands and in doing so had changed everything. The old order was crumbling, not with noise, but with quiet truth. And the universe, for the first time in centuries, began to hope." Part 5. 1 year after Earth severed ties with the Galactic Council, the universe looked nothing like it had before. The old order had not collapsed in fire or fury, but in quiet unraveling. Dozens of member worlds, tired of rigid rules and hidden hierarchies, declared their independence. Some formed new alliances. Others chose to stand alone, just as Earth had. The Free Accord, once a whisper among students and dock workers, was now a recognized political bloc with representatives from 17 species. And at its heart, though not officially part of it, stood Earth, silent, steady, and sovereign. The Council still existed, but its voice carried less weight. Its decrees were ignored more often than obeyed. Trade routes shifted. Knowledge flowed freely for the first time in millennia, thanks to the Helios Array's endless broadcast. Alien children learned human math. Human doctors studied alien healing techniques. On 100 worlds, people built schools, clinics, and farms using plans shared without price or permission. Earth had not conquered anyone. It had simply reminded the galaxy that cooperation did not require control. President Elena Ruiz stood on a balcony in Geneva, watching the sunrise paint the Alps in gold. She wore the same blue jacket, now slightly frayed at the cuffs. Below her, the city buzzed with life. Markets open, trains running, students walking to class. There were no soldiers in the streets, no emergency alerts, just ordinary days lived freely. She received daily reports from Mars, Titan, Europa, all stable, all growing. Earth's colonies were no longer outposts waiting for orders. They were homes, full of people making their own choices. In orbit, the Helios Array continued its work. Noah Bennett, still overseeing the project, had added new layers to the broadcast. Recent poetry, recordings of community meetings, even live feeds from Earth's oceans and forests. "Let them see we're not perfect," he told his team. "But let them see we try." The signal reached farther every day. Some species built listening posts just to receive it. Others wove human music into their own ceremonies. A Qatari temple on Viridia now played a Chopin nocturne at dawn. Lyra, the young scholar who had first defended Earth in her writings, was invited to speak at a summit on neutral ground near the Orion Spur. She stood before delegates from 50 worlds and said simply, "Earth did not leave because it hated the galaxy. It left because it loved itself enough to be honest, and in that honesty it gave us all permission to be honest too." Her words were recorded, translated, and shared across systems. Even some former council members nodded in agreement. Back on Earth, life had found a new rhythm. Factories that once made parts for alien ships now built tools for reforestation and ocean cleanup. Schools taught not just science and history, but ethics, empathy, and how to listen. Children like Jake Morales grew up knowing Earth was alone, but not lonely. He spent his afternoons repairing old radios, not to call for help, but to listen to the voices coming back from the stars. Most were in languages he didn't understand, but the tone was always the same. Gratitude, curiosity, hope. Captain Lisa Tran retired from active duty but stayed on as an advisor. She lived in a small house near the coast of Oregon, not far from where Daniel Hayes now taught diplomacy at a local university. They met often, drinking coffee and watching the waves. Neither spoke much about the fleet or the standoff. They didn't need to. They had lived it. What mattered now was what came next. And what came next was connection, but on new terms. The Free Accord sent a formal message to Earth, not a demand, but an invitation. They asked for nothing. They simply said, "If you ever wish to speak with us as equals, we are ready to listen." President Ruiz read the message in her office, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. She did not reply immediately. She wanted to be sure any future alliance would be born of choice, not convenience. On Mars, Kyle Dawson stood beside a newly planted grove of genetically adapted apple trees, earth trees, grown in red soil. He touched a leaf still damp with morning mist from the colony's recycled water system. A child ran past laughing, chasing a drone shaped like a bird. Maya Ellis joined him, her hands stained with engine grease. "They're asking us to join a new council," she said. "What do you think?" Kyle looked at the trees, then at the dome protecting the colony from the thin Martian air. "We'll decide together," he said. "Not because someone tells us to, because we want to." Earth had not become a galactic power. It had become something rarer, a beacon of self-respect. Other species began to follow its example. The Varelians opened their data vaults to all. The Xanthari youth demanded democratic reforms. Even the old council, humbled and shaken, began rewriting its charter to include voices it had long ignored. One evening, Jake Morales picked up a clear signal from Proxima Centauri. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a direct message, short and simple. It came in English, Qatari, and 3 other languages. "We remember, we build. We are not alone." He wrote it down in his notebook, then stepped outside. The sky was full of stars, but one shone brighter than the rest. Earth's sun seen from far away, but still home. President Ruiz gave one final address that year. She stood not in a grand hall, but in a schoolyard in Nairobi, surrounded by children from every continent. "We did not leave the galaxy," she said. "We left a system that forgot why we joined it in the first place. Now, if others want to build something better, with respect, with fairness, with room for all voices, then maybe one day we'll walk beside them. But only when we're ready, and only as ourselves." The universe had been left in disarray, not broken, but shaken awake. And in that disarray, something new was growing. Not an empire, not a council, but a web of worlds, each free, each listening, each learning. Earth had not led it. It had simply shown that it was possible, and that was enough.